So it's time. I've been a little busy, but as promised, the PCT Through Hike Lessons Learned, the Bubblehead Hikes Edition. So for those of you who are new to the channel, I through hiked the Pacific Crest Trail in 2024, started March 22nd and reached the Canadian border on the 27th of August. And yeah, it was fun. And went through the Sierra in the snow in May. So a bunch of gear changes and stuff like that because of the snow. And overall, it wasn't too bad. Had a couple fires that forced some reroutes. And that was the overall summary of the trip. So in this video, I'm going to cover lessons and personal observations and things that may be helpful or frankly not helpful to you. Enjoy. First one is to mail drop or not to mail drop. That's a great question. So at the beginning of my experience, I had a bunch of leftover food and things like that from other backpacking trips. So what I did was I mailed myself to the first couple towns in Southern California, namely Julian, Idlewild, things that I had at home. I just rounded up a bunch of stuff, threw it in a box, and it gave me resupply through those legs in Southern California. As the trail went on, resupplies in terms of food, no way. If you think about it, a flat rate box large from the U.S. Postal Service right now runs just under $25. You can use that $25 a lot wiser because in California, everything's freaking expensive, to include groceries, especially groceries. So you want to save every cent possible to get groceries and resupplies that you need. So that's that. Now, resupplying gear, that is really up to what you have before the trail and what you don't have before the trail. I had a lot of gear before the trail, so I just had my wife send out stuff to me. And what I did was, and here's the pro tip, is since if you have a partner or a support person who doesn't know much about hiking gear, put stuff in a bin and number it, and then create a list, number 1 through 20 or 1 through 30 or whatever you have, and have that list on your mobile device on the trail, and make sure your person back home has that list also, identical. So something goes like this. I wanted my tent sent home, and as a replacement, I wanted my tarp. So for example, I just asked my wife, hey honey, can you send me item number 18 to Bend, Oregon? Here's the address. And the ETA is whatever date. And so my wife doesn't have to know what the item is. She just goes to 18, grabs it off the bin, throws it in the box, and sends it to me. I found that was very helpful. Use that multiple times throughout the trail. So that's your pro tip on that. Yeah, second one's resupply. Really this kind of builds on the first one, is your tastes are going to change on a through hike. Most people's tastes change throughout a through hike. It's the rare bird that can eat the same thing day in and day out and survive through the hike and be mentally still, stable. Personally, to this day, I detest peanut butter. I'm not a fan of ramen, and I hate tuna. And that's because of the hike. I just had too much of that stuff. And so I just curbed that out of my diet now. And you're going to have to do your own thing, but I will tell you, you talk to most through hikers just buy stuff as they go. There are certain staples they like, but their taste changed throughout the hike. Mine did. Towards the end, I was cooking differently, which I'll talk about in a different lesson. All right, next lesson, building on this, is to cold soak your food or to cook your food. That is the question. Frankly, the answer comes down to your preferences. I did both. I cold soaked pretty much all my breakfasts on the entire through hike from Mexico to Canada. However, for lunch, I either just ate cold or I had a heated lunch using a stove. And then for dinner, I usually, all the way to Washington, I cooked all my dinners. And I enjoyed a warm meal at night. However, as I got closer to Washington, I came to the realization that I'm tired of carrying stuff. So I was just shedding more and more weight in my pack. So I just went for it and just started cold soaking as soon as I crossed the Columbia River. And I cold soaked the rest of the way. The only time I regretted not cold soaking was after I'd finished my through hike. We set up camp at Hopkins Lake, and basically slack packed all the way to the border and slack packed back to camp, and it was snowing and it was cold. And I was in my tarp and I had my cold soaked dinner, and that was the one time I wish I had something warm, because that was not a pleasant night. And ironically, it was after I was done with my thru hike and I was walking back to Harts Pass the next day. That was a really cold one. But other than that, the cold soaking worked out. Another one is just general hygiene. And I'm going to talk about foot care. You know, when you talk about driving your vehicle, you know, your tires are an absolute must. Think of them like your shoes. And your wheels are kind of like your feet. Always clean your feet. That was something that I made a point to do every single day on my thru hike. Was as soon as I got into camp, took my socks off, clean my feet. You got to clean your feet. You got to take care of them, because if you don't take care of them, the hike will be taken care of. Shoes. I had a whole thing on discussion about shoes during the thru hike and insoles and all that. Bottom line is everyone has different wear. You got to just listen to, you know, your feet and how they're performing through the hike. Building on resupply, another subset of this is, do you use Amazon or not? So the answer for my case was yes, I used Amazon, and I used it sparingly. I used it for shoes and I used it for some resupply. So for example, trekking pole tips. I went through 3 sets of trekking pole tips on my thru hike. And since I use Black Diamond, it's an established system, I could order them on Amazon ahead. And typically what I was doing was towards the, you know, the midpoint and beyond on my hike, I was making pretty good miles. So you needed to think like 300 to 400 miles ahead for Amazon. So for example, I knew about 400 miles out in Northern California from Ashland that I was going to need new shoes in Ashland and also new trekking poles. So I went ahead and Amazon that stuff. And unfortunately, the shoes didn't make it to Ashland. So I ended up, fortunately, there was a resupply there where there was an outfitter, and I could get a set of Ultra Lone Peaks there. But you got to plan. My recommendation would be, if you're going to do Amazon, always have a backup plan and be ready to go local and get stuff if you need it, if you're going to use Amazon. Next one was hike your own hike. It's so cliche, but let me just give you my example of hike your own hike. I watched a lot of videos of people who thru hiked the PCT before I went on my own thru hike. And I developed in my head a vision of what the hike was going to be. I'm a visualizer. I talk about it in some of my shorts. And to me, that's one of the mental strategies I use to deal with long-term projects or things that are, you know, adverse or challenging in my life. And it's a tried and true strategy. However, one of the drawbacks to it is if you visualize based on things, on other people's experiences, you run the risk of meshing your experience with someone else's. And I ended up doing that. So in Southern California, when I came to the realization that I couldn't make it to Mount San Jacinto because of the snow, and it wasn't safe with the group I was with and with myself, and put it all together, you know, I was down on myself because I wanted to do that. And that was the realization I had, was I was comparing myself to other people and their thru hike experiences. Their thru hikes weren't mine. And I had to come through that realization. You know, like they say, comparison is the thief of joy. So hike your own hike. Do not compare your hike to anyone else's, because yours is always unique. Another one is listen to your body. Cliche, but it's so true. When you go on a 2,000 plus mile hike, you're going to get hurt, or you're going to have a lot of sore muscles, or you're going to feel, you know, you're just going to have days where it's just not going well, and you're just going to have to deal with it. You know, for me, I had anterior tibialis on both my right and left feet, you know, during my hike. Those are painful. It's the leading edge tendon on both your feet, for those of you who don't want to look it up. And I had to cope with it. I had to cope with it through the High Sierra, which was really bad because I had to wear boots, crampons, and going through snow, and it was, you know, and I had to keep up with fast partners, which was fine, but it came at a price. And then in Northern California, my other foot got anterior tibialis as soon as my right one recovered, my left one. And so, you know, listen to your body, know when to take time off. You're gonna have to take time off if you have injuries, and, you know, make use of that time off to get right, because there's nothing worse than forcing the shot and end up getting injured in such a way that you can't finish your hike. I ran into tons of people who ended their hikes because they didn't listen to their body, in my opinion. So do that. Next one, to zero or not to zero. That's a personal choice. And, one thing to keep in mind is, I think, anecdotally, the average through hiker age is somewhere in their 20s. So, folks who are starting in life as young adults don't have the resources on average that a person my age, I'm twice their age, has. I've been saving for this hike for quite some time. I had a heck of a budget. But one of my goals in my hike was not just the through hike, but towns and places that I'd never been before. If I wanted to, I was going to stay a day or two and enjoy it and be a tourist. So, it goes back to, what are your goals for your hike? Well, one of them was to explore places. Bend, Oregon, for example, I spent 2 days there because I'd never been there. So I wanted to do that. But I had the funds, the means to do things like that. So I ended up taking over 30, 0 days on my through hike. I could have finished my hike in, 4 months if I would have not taken as many zeros. But keep in mind, again, it goes back to, it's personal preference. No one's going to grade you any other way, but you need to have the budget to do it. So let's talk budget, the ugly elephant in the room. Okay, so my budget was, I had up to $13,000 budgeted. I did not spend all of it. I just spent about $10,000 of it. And a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I can do it for $4,000. Well, fucking good on you. Okay. Again, going back to my previous lesson, I took 30 0 days and I enjoyed myself. I had good times. I also had some gear issues, which ran up my bill a little bit. I had things that broke that were unanticipated, which, I would say at least, $1,200 of that 10,000 were spent on emergent gear issues. Or I just got tired of something and didn't want to wait to have my wife send something, so I just bought it. Okay, I could afford to do that. Again, I've been saving for a long time for this. And so I had the budget to do it. If you don't have the budget to do it, you just need to be ready to accept the consequences. Or, like I said in another short, you need to have the gear repair skills and the ingenuity to work around stuff. I could have done this hike a lot cheaper if I, did things like not stay in a hotel versus hostel, okay, or just camping. That's another one. I did a combination of things. I stayed in a hostel, I stayed in hotels, I stayed at a Trail Angels place. I've also camped at RV parks. You want to save money? Staying in an RV park, that is great. You can pitch your tent. Most RV parks have all the conveniences: laundry, Wi-Fi, a place to camp. They also have a little convenience store. Probably not the best resupply, but it's not that bad. Think about that if you're choosing between a hotel or a hostel. RV parks are in a lot of towns. Another one is hostels. They're generally okay. The best one I found on the trail in terms of hostels, boy, there's a couple. The Bernie Mountain Guest Ranch was fantastic. I love it. I hope they succeed. It's an interesting business model, in my opinion. They're the closest thing to an AT style hostel I've seen. The one in South Lake Tahoe, that one was freaking amazing. I loved it. It's almost like a hotel experience, but it's a hostel. And it's right next to the border, lots of dining options, etc. And that was really good. Trail Angels, God bless Trail Angels. Great people. They care about the trail. They care about hikers. Don't abuse it. Be respectful, offer money when you can, and help out. Dealing with weather. I started March 22nd, so the first 4 weekends of my through hike, we had snow every weekend. So recognize when you're in a bubble, you're going to be in a scramble with everybody else for resources. So be mindful of that, and that resources like lodging, for example, are limited commodities. So there's a couple ways to deal with that. One is be proactive, and if you know bad weather's coming, go ahead and get a room now. Second one, which is more common, is if you get a room, offer it up to other hikers so you can split the cost. That's a great cost saving measure. I did that a lot on my through hike. Another one is be ready to camp and hunker down and go through. I stopped in Julian. I only stayed for 1 day, but then I went back out and endured more weather at the end of that storm system because I just didn't want to spend the money and I just want to keep going down trail. Again, personal choice. You just need to be ready to accept your own decisions. But there's a couple strategies to doing that. So how much food do you carry? Well, that's a good question. It all depends on how much you're willing to hike per day. And you just recognize that it's a competing effect. So if you can only hike 10 miles a day and it's 80 miles between supply stops, you're going to be carrying a boatload of weight, which is going to slow you down because you already can only hike 10 miles a day. And you see the vicious cycle there. So it's imperative to get in shape before the hike. It reduces the chances of injury, it allows you to go further, and you end up carrying less food. That's my advice to you. Get in shape. If you think you're going to do a 2,600 mile hike in 4 months and only hike 10 miles a day, the math don't work out. Okay, and I guarantee you're not going to make it. You need to have at least some semblance of physical fitness and, more importantly, resilience and endurance before you do it. There's a whole bunch of training programs out on the internet. Check them out. One that's what I thought was really good, I didn't do it, but it looked pretty good, was Blaze Physio. She has a pretty good set of videos which goes over some exercises and a fitness training plan you can do prior to doing your through hike. What did I do? I did CrossFit, lifting weights, and rucking. I live in Florida. It's flat as fuck. And I was ready to go for Southern California, with the exception of the desert climate, which took a little bit of adjustment. But once I got used to it, I was GTG. Never sore from the hiking aspect. And, the training was good. Additionally, I also did a shakedown hike, truth be told. I did a 170-mile hike from Springer Mountain, Georgia to the entrance to Great Smoky Mountains National Park as my shakedown in the middle of February in North Carolina and Georgia. And it was cold, but I did it for a reason, for a multitude of reasons, and it got me ready for my hike. Continuing on the topic of food, I mentioned the seesaw effect, right? So the less shape you're in, the less distance, but you got to carry more food, and the more food you carry, it's this vicious cycle and the downward spiral. So, by the end, I was doing Snoqualmie to Stevens Pass. I had 3 days of food. That's it. A lot of people who are out of shape, who don't through hike, who are just coming in off the blue to do that section, will probably do it in 5 or 6 days. I ran into section hikers that had 6 days of food. There's no freaking way I was carrying 3 days of food for that section. But at the beginning of my through hike, the first day on trail, I only did 11 miles. I was doing 25 to 30 miles by the end. And so, that gauges your fitness, and you'll get an idea of what your food carrying and, how much food you need and versus how much you have. Always carry a little bit of backup. You never know if you may get injured or you have to spend an extra night in the woods. There are a couple times on my through hike where I actually had to tap into my reserve to actually get me to the next town because of weather. Additionally, one of the benefits of having extra food is as a celebration. If you know you're going to get in early, so if you budget 4 days of food and it's only 3 days, guess what you get? You get an extra meal. And there's nothing like having a second dinner the night before you head into town for a resupply. Building on food, water. Water. You're going to have to figure out your own water carry. I'm probably not the best person in the world to give you advice on water carry. I always carried an extra half liter to a liter of water all the time on trail. Just to give you an idea, I could go 700 milliliters of water for 15 miles. So that's my hydration level. But I stay mega hydrated. I camel up at every stop, and I stay hydrated throughout the day, and I take a fair amount of electrolytes. Noon tablets, big shout out. They're readily available throughout the trail. They're not the best tasting, but they work. If I could completely do my hike, in a perfect world, resource unconstrained, I would use Element once a day and just top off with electrolytes or with Walmart drink mixes throughout the day. But not a perfect world. I ended up doing a mix of Walmart drink mixes and Noon. But yeah, 700 milliliters. That's me. But I always carried an extra liter because of cold soaking at the end, and also I just always wanted to have extra water in case I had some hot stretches. One of the keys, and I mentioned it in another video, I always started at 5 in the morning. Why? Well, one of the reasons is it's less freaking warm at 5 in the morning and the sun's not up yet. So you don't lose as much water from sweat. So I could get, by 8 o'clock, I'm already at 10 miles and I don't have to use as much water. So think about that. Most young people, actually most people that I hike with, just scratch the age thing. It's just an observation. Typically didn't leave camp until later. They were typically later risers, but they also came in late. I hate coming into camp late, so it's a preference. But I end up carrying less water because I started earlier. Building on leaving in the morning, always, always, always. Morning miles are always more than afternoon miles. It's just it's anecdotal, but tongue in cheek, haha. I truly believe you can hike more miles before lunch than any other time of the day. I got more miles done, before lunch than any other time in the day. Now, you could disagree with me. I don't care. That's just an observation. Again, there's tons of benefits to leaving early in the morning. And I think they outweigh the hiking at night, come in late crowd. That's my opinion. Loading your pack. You need to figure out how you're going to load your pack. I had a pretty good system dialed in before I started my thru hike because I've hiked a lot. But it did change over the course of the hike a little bit, just a couple tweaks. I always put my quilt at the bottom. I always line my pack with a trash bag because your pack's never waterproof, by the way. And then I loaded in my pillows and then my quilt liner or my sleeping bag liner. Then I sealed that up, and then I put in my food bag and my ditty bag, and then at the very top was my shelter. And then I kind of have to fill in the space. I put my puffy jacket in and stuff like that. So that's typically the way I loaded my pack. You have to figure out your own system, what works. If you've been on the Appalachian Trail and you've been caught in a rainstorm, you learn pretty quickly to pack your shelter at the top of your pack. It's self-correcting. And if you're leaving camp, especially like in Washington, Northern Oregon, where it was rainy and it's wet, having your shelter at the top, you don't have to put it in your pack. You just put it on the outside. So something to consider. One little thing I learned the hard way was the PCT has a lot of trees, and they're at about the 6-foot level, and branches tear up things. I always kept my 1/8 inch Gossamer Gear foam pad on the outside of my pack. Typically I put it on the top. Bad mistake. It just ripped the crap out of it because I kept brushing up against tree canopy, especially in the desert. You think the desert, oh my gosh, there's no trees. There's a lot of trees in the desert. It's misleading. It's not the desert, it's Southern California. So just be prepared for that for those of you who are contemplating future through hikes. I mentioned the umbrella in my gear thing. I wouldn't bring an umbrella for the PCT. Just wear a sun hoodie or a sun hat and just get over it. I did wear pants. Pants are important, in my opinion, because I didn't want to wear sunscreen. And I wore pants all the way to the Oregon border, and then I switched to shorts the rest of the way. Again, personal choice. Do you. You do you. Take what the trail gives you. Fighting the trail is a losing proposition. What do I mean by that? You're going to have days where you're going to have to walk through snow. If you started when I did, you're going to be walking through a boatload of snow. And, you can't make it melt, so you're just going to have to figure out how to deal with it. Don't fight it. It's going to be frustrating. If you saw my videos during, my hike, there were days where it was very frustrating. Just got to get through it, man. Just don't fight it. Accept it. Roll through it. Move on. Building on that, you're going to have crappy days. You're going to have days where, I've heard, only quit on a good day. Don't quit on a bad day, blah, blah, blah. Just don't fucking quit. That's easier said than done. Okay, fine. Maybe you're, the only thing that's going to stop me was physical injury. And, you need to have that mindset, in my opinion. If you're seriously committed to doing this through hike, all right, and it's only for the people who really know that they're going to get this done. I did a short on that, on some tips on how to deal with that. You got to have the mental drive to do it. The hike is not physical, man. It is mental, and I talked about my tips, projection, breaking the trip into bits, yada yada. You can watch that on my channel. I will tell you, you need to write down the reasons why, WHY, you're doing your through hike. You need to write them down, keep them on you, because there's going to be a time. For me, there was one time during my through hike where I was having the worst day of my life, and I needed to stop and have a little freaking team meeting in my head to crash the pity party, stop the bullshit, get back to the basics, realign myself, pull my head out of my ass, and get aligned and get moving. And what anchored that was my whys. I had to go back through why I'm through hiking, all right? And I have 4 reasons, and I'm not going to discuss them because I think your reasons are personal. And I had my 4 reasons. I went through them and I re-inventoried where I was at, and I realized that I'm just being a little bitch and I needed to lock that shit up. So I did. And the day went great. So yeah, building on having your whys is, you're not hiking alone. That's another one, right? There is an entire community of like-minded individuals hiking with you on your through hike. Don't be afraid to strike up a conversation and I guarantee the other person that's hiking that you see on the trail is having a similar experience to you, or maybe they've had what you had experienced on a different day. Okay, we're all in this together, and do not suffer in silence. All right, through hikers are amazing people, and you're going to find people that are your part of your tribe. Okay, you're not going to get along with everybody, but I guarantee there are people out there that are like-minded like you, and those are good people to talk to and bounce things off. Speaking of people that you get along with or not get along with, I found that beer unites people. Frankly, you could have your differences, but after a beer or two, you can find a lot of freaking common ground. I'm not encouraging people to drink, but in the toughest of situations where you can't seem to find ground with people, beer generally helps. Yeah. All right, so I don't do drugs. I don't do any of that shit. Okay, it's bad for you. There's no place in my life for it. Never done it, never will. That said, a lot of people like to smoke pot, and there are a lot of people who smoke pot on trail. Good on them. It's their life. Just recognize if you're not into that stuff, there's a lot of it around you. Just be respectful of others. It's their life. They can do what they want, and frankly, who cares, right? It's not really imposing on you. Keep an open mind. That was one of my goals for the trail, was meeting a lot of different people from walks of life that I never would have met if I didn't do the through hike, right? We all get into our own circles in life through our own occupations, personal life, etc. And what I really enjoyed from the hike was the people and the vast differences and backgrounds and life circumstances. I met people. I learned so much from people like half my age. I learned more from them than they learned from me. And it was great, spending time with them and learning different perspectives. You don't have to agree with their positions on things. Who cares? The fact that I opened my mind to it, listened to what they had to say, and learned something from it was very rewarding for me. Trail Magic. Thank the people who offer Trail Magic. They're exceptional people. They don't have to do this. And don't have an attitude towards people who give Trail Magic, okay? I saw a couple instances where people kind of had an attitude about it, and they were commenting about the quality of the Trail Magic. Dude, it's better to have some Trail Magic than none. So those people, they can STF you. Hitchhiking. Oh, wow. That's an interesting topic. Everything I'm going to say is my opinion, and it's from my experiences. Typically, if you're a male, your odds of getting a hitch go up if you're paired up with a female. Females have an easier time getting a hitch. It's just human psychology. If you're in a large group, more than like 4 people, break up the group, I would say, into pairs, because people giving rides typically don't have the capacity to take 3 or more people. So just be ready for that. I would say keep, let's say you're in a group of 4, keep 2 off in the woods or just out of sight, and then, see what you can get. And maybe they have the room, and then when you pick up, say, hey, I got some friends that are right behind me, can they get a ride too? That's that. Other one is, you're going to have times where you're just not going to get hitched. There's just terrible places. For example, Chester, California, for whatever reason, was a pain. And, for 45, 50 minutes, me and this other guy were trying to get a hitch, and we were unsuccessful. I ended up texting a buddy who was in town who knew someone who had a car, and when he actually came out and gave us a ride. That was the only way we can get in. I posted on a Facebook page. I had internet connection. Hey, Trail Angel Facebook page. 2 hikers looking for a ride, and got a response pretty quickly on another hitch. So that's that. Now, this is the part where this is definitely my observations. Stereotypes save time. Take that to the bank. The type of vehicle that drives by, I think, drives the odds of getting a hitch. So, for example, if someone is driving a Jeep, lifted truck, something that looks like that, your odds of getting a hitch are pretty fucking low. You're just not going to get it. If they're towing something, you're not going to get a hitch. If they're a utility truck, you're probably not going to get a hitch. Okay, that's just expect that. So what are vehicles that have a higher odds of getting hitched? Typically older vehicles, people who are older may give you a hitch. People who drive Subarus, for whatever reason, drive a Subaru, your odds of getting a hitch are much higher. That worked on the Appalachian Trail. It worked on the Pacific Crest Trail. I just can't. I have my thoughts on it. I think people who typically buy Subarus are more generous to and adventurous to picking up hikers, because I think for whatever reason, a lot of people who are outdoorsy buy Subarus. I'm outdoorsy. I own a freaking Jeep and a Toyota Tacoma. I'm willing to give hikers a ride, but I'm the exception, not the norm. But just look for that. Typically, your stereotypical crunchy people who drive vehicles, you're going to have higher odds getting a ride. Want to get a better night's sleep in camp? Just get used to sleeping. You're going to have to just figure it out. You know, you have to go from sleeping at home to sleeping out in the woods. It's just going to take time. It takes me a couple weeks every time to get used to it. One thing I do recommend, always, is have earplugs. The last thing in the world you want to do is hear some motherfucker sawing logs at night, waking your ass up. It's just, it could be you. You could wake yourself up. And also, other people, you could be snoring and you could be annoying other people. So just wear hearing protection. Another lesson, getting to the end here, is have fun. You're doing this, most likely, this through hike, that's the subject, because it's an adventure of a lifetime. So make it an adventure of a lifetime. Never take it for granted, because it'll end quicker than you think. Looking back on it, I was so excited when I left Campo and I was walking north. I was like pinching myself, like, I can't believe this is happening. And the next thing you know, I'm in the High Sierra. Next thing you know, I'm in Oregon. Next thing you know, I'm approaching Canada. And it happens, it goes by pretty quickly. So for goodness sake, enjoy the trip. You're going to have days it's going to suck, but it's all part of the experience. Trust me. Other thru hikers will tell you the same thing. It's part of the experience. It's part of the package. You're being tested, and it's good to be tested. Otherwise, why do things in life if they're just freaking easy? Jumping topics, but one of the things I forgot to cover, which I'm now going to cover, is posterior chain alignment. I truly think maintaining a proper posture goes a long way in addressing knee problems, ankle problems, anything in what we call the posterior chain. When I was dealing with my second bout of anterior tibialis in Northern California, I had stumbled upon a video where a guy talks about posterior chain alignment and just walking with your shoulder blades back, forcing yourself to walk more upright. I did that, and that was such a game changer. I talk about extensively in one of my videos in Northern California. I think it was Northern California. It may have been Oregon. I don't know. It all blends in. But anyways, it was a game changer of a day. And try that. And you'd be surprised at how that reduces wear and tear and injury. All right. The people. The trail's about the people. It's not about the trail. So just, if you're going to take pictures, my recommendation is take more pictures of people. I have tons of pictures of non-people. Looking back, I wish I took more pictures of people. I met some incredible people. The power of the trail, the community, the trail angels, the hiker towns, the generosity, that's what the trail is about. It's not about summiting Forester Pass. Who gives a fuck? You're gonna go through it, okay? I mean, that's cool, but it's nothing as cool as meeting people you never met before, or seeing people you haven't seen a couple hundred miles and hug them like they're your long lost sister or brother, and you haven't seen them in forever. That's the power of human connection. To me, that's the most important thing of the trail. It restored my faith in humanity. So just give that a thought. Okay, I was in the middle of production, and I realized I didn't talk about the Far Out app. So yes, I used the Far Out app during the hike, and it was useful. Just filter the comments, apply common sense. For example, here's a useless comment. I spotted a bear at mile 1619.4. Do you think the bear is just going to stay at 1619.4 and just wait for people like a non-player character? No, of course not. So don't put stupid comments in far out. If you're going to make a comment, make it useful. You know, on this date there was water, it was flowing, it was reliable. You know, that's useful to other hikers. Other than that, yeah, you know, and there's a lot of fear mongering, you know. So a lot of people skipped this High Sierra and they went up to Northern California and they started hiking southbound, and they were, you know, yeah, you know, they were not experienced with the High Sierra and the snow. So they're making comments related to their own experience. And you just need to filter that with your own perspective, and not everybody's abilities are the same. So this is something to consider about far out. All right, so there you go. It's a bunch of lessons, random thoughts. Interested in your comments and your thoughts on this as I sit here removed from the trail for almost 2 months now. Yeah, it was a good experience. Restored my faith in humanity, like I said. You know, I'm glad I did it because it was a big challenge and it proved to me that I could do it. You know, I've done a lot of large projects in my life and things like that. You know, but to me, it was something that I planned on doing, I visualized, and I did it. And it was a blast. I'd love to do it again. And but that's a function of other factors in my life right now. And but, you know, I'll be doing some smaller hikes. Plan on doing some trail magic and some trail work as I go forward here. But hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any comments or questions, please post, and I will follow up on questions in future videos or shorts. Thanks for watching.